Hello, coaches! Welcome to Season 3 of Coach Better Spotlight. Today, it's just me and Clint chatting about our upcoming episodes this season. Because this year, Clint and I really didn't have too many chances to record episodes together, I'll be sharing a preview of some of the awesome Coach Better conversations that we have lined up for Season 3. You will see in today's preview that they're all structured around our three main certificate programs: COTAIL, the Certificate of Educational Technology and Information Literacy, the Coach, and Women Who Lead. So that gives you a little bit of a window into the learning in each of those programs throughout our episodes this year. Plus, we have a few sneak peeks into our shorter Mastermind Ed courses. Along with the preview of our upcoming episodes, we chat about the ways that we can continue some of the positive outcomes from remote and hybrid learning to take advantage of all the new things we've learned in the past year and a half. As always, we love your feedback. So if you have questions about coaching or you just want to chat about coaching with us, please join our Coach Better Facebook group or connect with us on social media at Eduro Learning. You can also listen to the full-length podcast wherever you get your podcasts by subscribing to Coach Better. All right, welcome back to another episode of Coach Better. Today, Clint and I are here to give you a bit of a preview to Season 3, which should be a little bit interesting because due to the whole COVID craziness, it was mostly me conducting these interviews. So I get to tell you a lot about what I'm excited about for Season 3, and hopefully Clint will ask me some good questions so I'm not just talking the whole time.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear this preview. I'm having a look. I've got a sneak peek of the list of episodes on my screen here, and I'm really excited to see what's going on. I mean, I think looking at the list, there was maybe definitely one that I was
definitely one,
in, but I think only one of these episodes. So I want to know, what are you super excited about for this upcoming season?
All right, so it was amazing, as I feel like all of our episodes always are a great opportunity for learning. And I think this season was really good because I got to chat with a lot of people who are like my idols in various different areas. So that was really exciting for me. We're starting off the season with Firouzeh Dumas, who is the author of Funny in Farsi, which is an amazing opportunity to chat with the New York Times bestseller. I think that's the first personal conversation I've ever had with a New York Times bestseller. And I really loved the perspective of how we can bring creativity and enjoyment in literature into our classroom with someone who actually does that for a living. So that was really inspiring to kind of kick off the season. And then we have tons of co-tailers on the podcast for the whole first semester, because we're changing up the COTAIL registration schedule so that you can register to join COTAIL in October, November for a January start. So we wanted to feature lots of great co-tailers in the first semester. And then in the middle of the year, we have all of these coaching idols that I'm so excited to share with you all. I talked to Diane Sweeney, to Jo Ellen Killian, to Laura Lipton. I also talked to a bunch of female leaders for kind of the third part of our season where we're talking about women who lead. I got to talk to Jennifer Abrams, Dr. Shantae Garrett. I got to talk to Jo Ellen Killian and a bunch of her colleagues again. So it has just been kind of a whirlwind of having all these amazing conversations. That's an overview.
Now, the one episode that I was involved with is the Jo Ellen Killian one, and I must say that is probably the most insightful conversation that I feel like we've had in these conversations that we've been doing for the past couple of years. And it's that idea, you're looking at this list, and it is a bunch of coaching idols, but it's also people who have come up into coaching and learning about what that coaching looks like and how do you translate that coaching experience into leadership experience or vice versa. How do you combine the two? So it looks like it's going to be an amazing amalgamation of lots of different experiences, lots of different perspectives, very diverse viewpoints. Yeah, it's super exciting.
Yeah, that Joe Ellen Killian episode, I mean, I don't want to like pick favorites because they were all really great, but that one was such a masterclass. There's actually quite a few in this season that I have been sharing the unedited version of the episode with people in the Coach Certificate Program because the episode is so good. I want them to have access to it immediately, even though it's not ready yet. And that is one of the ones that I've been sharing like crazy because there's so much in there about building a coaching program, about working with your admin, about evaluating coaching, about understanding the elements of what successful coaching looked like. Like that was a masterclass in 1 hour, just done.
Yep. No, I mean, I did Coattail ages and ages and ages ago.
Yes.
Feels like forever ago. Tell me a little bit more about the changes that you were referencing and about some of the conversations that you had with current Coattailers.
Yes. So what I really find exciting and inspiring is to hear from educators who are currently doing innovative things in their schools. I mean, I think that's kind of the point of this podcast, that we're always talking to these really innovative educators. And so we tried to bring together a bunch of episodes that will give our listeners, give you an insight into what's going on in schools around the world. And we've scheduled them all to lead up to the Coattail registration opening in October. So you get a peek inside of Coattail with all of those episodes. And then if you're ready, you want to join Coattail, you'll know the timeline to be able to do that. And so those episodes include a feature with some of our Coattail instructors and graduates with Joel Bevins, Ryan Harwood, Diana Beabout, and Amy Garrett, talking about what makes coaching successful, how we define our role as coaches, what it looks like, what makes it work in terms of tech coaches from that Coattail perspective, because so many of our Coattailers go on to be tech coaches. And then we have another episode with Carrie Hart and Andre DeCocker, who are both Coattail graduates and both the Coach graduates, talking about implementing innovation spaces in their schools, like the realities, the logistics, how it works to like manage space with other educators that is kind of like open-ended like that, and how you can bring the coaching aspect of the role into a designer innovation space. And then Panna Asavavatana, she recently hosted the Early Years Exchange Conference entirely virtually, another Coattail graduate, but understanding the power of virtual events, understanding how we can bring together a community in virtual spaces in a way that is so meaningful that we can continue to do even beyond COVID. Like that was a really enlightening kind of conversation to maybe help ourselves or others recognize that virtual events, virtual professional learning is just as good as face-to-face learning, and in fact can bring in so much more because you can connect so much more broadly. And then I had a great conversation with a bunch of Coattail graduates talking about the way that Coattail impacts their current classroom practice. And that was really nice to hear from educators around the world years after graduating Coattail like you, that their practice is still impacted, kind of getting that all together in one episode.
I think it's going to be really interesting. You were talking about the conversation that you had with Panna. I think it's going to be really interesting to kind of look back on these interviews, because you've done them over the course of the last 6 months, 7 months, and how COVID and the COVID responses and the hotspots and the flare-ups in different parts of the world and how it's affected different people at different times, how that sort of shades the conversations that we're having. Because I think, like you were saying with your conversation with Panna, I think there's a lot that we can learn in our responses, in our school responses, in our personal educational responses to how we've dealt with COVID, the curveballs that we've been thrown, the changes that have come up immediately, how we've had to adapt our practice, and what of those practices are worth keeping, what of those practices are necessary, what are the things that we can shelve until, hopefully it doesn't, but until it happens again, when it happens again. And I think there's just a lot for us to think about. And I think one of the personal impacts of COVID, or professional impacts of COVID for me is, my job had to change, right? Which is why I'm not involved in a lot of these episodes, because I had to go back into the classroom to support the school that I'm in. how has your job changed? How might your job change? And what can we all do to be better prepared for this in the future if it happens again? Or what can we all do to improve our practice? How have we improved our practice to just make ourselves better and more aware educators, regardless of the situation? So I think it's going to be, everyone says it's one of those historical times. It's going to be one of those historical seasons where you look back, in 10 years' time and go, oh yeah, I remember when that was happening. And this brings back all of these memories. And this is my adaptation to that over time based on that. Yeah. And I'm sure that we're going to hear that reflected in these interviews.
Yeah. And I also think it's really interesting when you're talking about how your job has changed, what we're going to keep and what we're going to let go of, the opportunity to, I have two thoughts that I'm trying to weave into one statement, the opportunity to look at challenges we faced at the beginning of the pandemic as potential, like open-minded new ways to look at the way we teach and learn, and also learn as educators, as adults as well. So bringing together that face-to-face and that online experience is kind of my takeaway from Pana's episode, that yeah, there was so much good that came out of being able to host an event virtually, because now parts of the world that would never have been able to have been engaged in this conversation, the community that she has built is much more global than it would have been had she just been limited to hosting in Taipei. But that doesn't mean in the future there can't be a face-to-face element to this event. And maybe, in fact, it's many synchronous face-to-face events happening that is connected through this virtual lens. And like, to bring that all back to Coattail, that all puts me in that mindset of, yes, there's a lot about leveraging technology and transforming learning through technology in Coattail, but it's really about opening your eyes to the potential, the possibilities. And I think in COVID, we were kind of sometimes forced to do things that we didn't want to do or didn't enjoy doing or were hard to do because of the greater issue of the pandemic. But how can we look at that as an opportunity to, oh, maybe something different is possible that I didn't expect and that I now feel I have the capacity to manage and build on and actually use in my classroom or in my profession on a regular basis.
Yeah. And like you, I've got two thoughts running through my head. I know one of the things that we always talk about in Coattail, we talk about in schools all this time, is this idea of the digital divide. And it felt like over time that's become sort of an outdated concept almost, because it's like, well, the access to information is more ubiquitous, especially with mobile phones and 5G coming, and one-to-one laptop programs aren't that rare anymore. They're more the norm, especially in international schools. But now I think it's actually more a question of digital equity.
Yes.
And thinking about Pana's event, and we've before we started recording, I was telling you about a couple of things that we've done in China. But we have the opportunity to include schools who normally couldn't be included because it's now virtual. So that school that's in the middle of Mozambique and they probably can't easily get to Taipei to go to this early years conference.
Yes.
Are you going to stop providing that? Or is that one of those things that you start adding on, right? Yes. And keep doing? And how do you make that judgment of, is it worth it? It's an opportunity for a lot of the more established schools and a lot of the more affluent schools to almost, it sounds a little condescending when I say it out loud, but you know what I mean? It's almost like a service to give back to the educational community. How do we provide these platforms so that schools around the world can benefit from our experience? And if you are that school that's putting it on, how do you give that opportunity to your students, for example, to have student-led experiences where they are supporting students that they might not ever meet? So that was my first thing. And the second thing was getting back to this idea of what do we keep? What do we start doing? What do we stop doing? I know the overwhelming feeling at a lot of schools as soon as we got back onto campus was, oh, I'm glad I never have to do that again.
Yes.
And a lot of the good habits that we know are good educationally to support students and teachers, we've gotten rid of just because we were in such a rush to get back to the normal. And I think that's going to be a real challenge for us to talk about it. And again, I think as coaches, how do you help tap into those experiences? almost like to get positivity out of the trauma, right?
Yes.
How do you use that trauma of being online and being isolated? And, I think we still talk about, like, it is a very traumatic experience for a lot of students and for a lot of teachers, and they don't want to think about it. But how do we start actually unpacking that, to say, actually, these were the amazing things we were doing, and how do we work that into our everyday work? And I think it's a big ask, but I think that's a role for coaches to start helping their colleagues unpack and think about that, and create a strategy for, like, hey, this was actually really good. Celebrate it, codify it, and keep doing it.
Yes. I think one of the takeaways from what you're saying about what was good, as an episode I actually skipped over talking about, and it's one that features our 2 Coachell graduates, actually, as part of our Mastermind Ed Culturally Responsive Leadership course, which was created and facilitated by Darnell Fine and Renee Green. Liz Cho and Ceci Gomez both were in that course, and they they participated with teams from their individual schools. So Ceci from Saigon South and Liz from Korea International School. And that experience of them having the virtual learning with Darnell and Renee, who maybe they may not have been able to have in person, but ironically both have had in person in their schools. And then their team being able to talk about that impact locally at their school, while also having the wider conversation with a bunch of other schools, not just SSIS and KIS were in that particular course. So, like, that opportunity to get a global perspective on something that you're learning about, in this case, culturally responsive leadership, social justice, that kind of thing. Having that global perspective, and then having the local community perspective, because you're in the course together as a team. To me, if that is like one thing that comes out for professional learning over this pandemic, that is really powerful, that would be like, I would be super excited about that, because I think we look down upon any sort of online professional learning, maybe less so now, but the potential of connecting, collaborating, and understanding something through a variety of lenses in a wider audience than you would normally have access to, but bringing it back to your school in a team, to me, that is like leveraging professional learning to the max, because it's not just I go away to a conference and I come back and I do something or I don't do something. It's the conference, the learning is happening right here in my school. I just have this global community that I'm learning with.
Right. And, when you and I were both at YIS, that was some of the original Coachell cohorts, right?
Yes.
Is working online and then coming together as a group from schools around Japan to then spend a weekend together and sort of unpack that and have that conversation. So it's really that next iteration.
Yes.
And I think you're right. I think a lot of times we look at online learning as like, I'm just going to sit here and watch a video or listen to somebody talk to me, talk at me. And it's very, very, very passive. Whereas I think when you flip it a little bit, and you put that innovative spin on it, and it's not really innovative. It's just like, how do I recreate the things that I really want to do and not go to the lowest common denominator and have high expectations, which ironically is what we all learned how to do when we as teachers were teaching online through COVID, right?
Yes.
And so I think it's a real opportunity for growth. And real opportunity for expansion for all of us. Is like, let's raise our expectations of what online professional learning looks like. Let's make sure that we're getting what we want out of it, and not just seat time or Zoom time. And like, Kim was there for 27 hours, give her certificate. Like, no, Kim did something. She's got something out of it. Like, and I don't need my certificate because I've got the learning to back it up.
Yeah. And I think that feeling of building community in digital spaces, to me, that's like, I'm going to do a little plug for Eduro. That's something that we're exceptionally good at, because it's what we've been doing since the very beginning. And that feeling of we're here together to support each other. We're better together. I mean, that someone actually, we had our first Women Who Lead Global cohort meeting yesterday. And that was the key takeaway of one of the participants. She was like, we're better together. And I was like, yes, like that is what I want professional learning to feel like. And I don't want your together to be exclusively only the people at your school, because there's so much potential to learn beyond your school. And I'll segue that into the whole section about all the coaching people, because this was really eye-opening for me, not only to speak to those like experts, those esteemed experts that I was so honored to get to speak to, but I also got to chat with lots of coaches in schools doing really interesting things that provide a really good window into how coaching is working in different parts of the world. I spoke to Anne-Marie Chow at United World College, Southeast Asia, Singapore, East Campus, who is now the middle school vice principal, but was previously an English teacher. And she held I think it's the director of digital learning. I think that's the title of her job. But she talked about the ways that they're integrating cognitive coaching and instructional coaching, like two models of coaching within one campus. And that was really interesting to like really hear her talk through that in detail, because I think, especially in Asia, as you know, lots of schools are implementing cognitive coaching, but don't necessarily have a full coaching program, and they kind of have both. So that was really cool. And then I also spoke with the authors of the EduCoach Survival Guide, who are based out of Portland and working in Portland area school districts, Lindsay and Angela. And that was great to get so many kind of real world scenarios of, you know, what happens to coaches in our everyday lives and how we can handle it, from the authors of this book, who have all these great scenarios, and they're really fun and enjoyable to hear like their kind of perspective on what happens in the real world in coaching. And I also spoke to, sorry, this is in addition to all those amazing experts, I just want to highlight all these like regular people. I also spoke to the team at Nido de Aguilas in Chile. And I had no idea how well developed their coaching team was. It's been growing over the last, I think, 7 or 8 years. And being able to speak to two members of that team, Colleen Ackford and Jennifer, cannot remember her last name right now, but Colleen and Jennifer, and just hear how that program has grown and evolved over time was really helpful for anyone building a coaching program, like not sure where to start, or also trying to push your program further because they're kind of in that space. Because I spoke to them, I also spoke to Kristen Moreland, who is at Pan American School in Brazil, and not yet in season 3 because I have not been able to schedule it. I spoke to Shannon Beckley. The conversation is recorded, but I haven't fit it into the schedule. And she's at Graded in Sao Paulo, and talking about how they're leveraging coaching for their kind of strategic goals for this year. Like the ways that they're bringing coaching into building on their strategic goals was really interesting. And because of that, maybe not because of that, but connected to that, I have a participant in the coach this year who's at her school. So kind of I feel like this season we get a bit of a window into coaching, maybe beyond just the Asia region, which we talk to normally a lot of Asia region people. This season, there's a lot more kind of global coaching stories, which is really cool.
And I think in a lot of the conversations that you probably have independently outside of podcasts and that I have, and people are really interested in, is like, how do I start a coaching program, or how do we make sure that our coaching program, you know, is strong? And I think what we all realize is there is no one blueprint. You can't just be like, oh, this happened at school X, I'm going to implement it at my school, because of that culture and because there are so many elements. But by looking at so many examples and talking to people, and I think people are really open about sharing what are their strengths, what are their struggles, what are their challenges, what did they have to overcome, what adaptations have they made. Again, better together, right? We're learning from everyone else about what to do, what not to do, what to look out for. It's really great to hear a school like at UWC or in Chile at Nido to be like, wow, that's really good. How do I take those bits that I can and use that? And then what are the other bits that I need to fill based on me being in Saudi Arabia or me being in, you know, Tunisia or wherever you happen to be, because it won't be that exact same. And sprinkle in those coaching legends, those experts, Diane Sweeney, Joel and Killian, right? I know back in the day, we've got one with Steve Barkley. Like there's a lot of that kind of underlying foundational knowledge as well. So it's foundational, it's practice, it's leadership, it's teachers in the classroom, it's coaches supporting teachers. So it sounds like it's a really kind of well-rounded 3-dimensional season to hit all aspects. Yes. And I have to talk a little bit about the last couple of episodes, just because I think it's only fair, focusing on women in leadership and kind of making that transition to leadership, talking to Jennifer Abrams, who wrote Having Hard Conversations,
Dr. Shante Garrett, who is a superintendent of a charter school in North Carolina. Again, talking to Joelle and Killian and a bunch of the authors of the books that you and I have both read, which was amazing. Got to talk to a bunch of women Cindy Harrison, anyway, a bunch of women who all authored coaching books together, and then spoke to our scholarship team recipients from the Women Who Lead scholarship recipients this year, and also Shay Asensio, who does service learning, like looking at coaching as leadership and building your leadership capacity through your coaching skills. I think a lot of times coaching is kind of that middle gray area that has really no positional leadership, no actual authority, but in many ways you're building so many critical leadership skills, and hearing that articulated from these inspirational leaders and being able to recognize as an educator, period, whether you're a coach or not, the ways that you are building your leadership skills so that you then can share that with others in that interview process. I mean, that's really powerful. I think a lot of times we don't recognize leadership within ourselves.
Right. And I'm going to use the term leadership credibility.
Yes.
Right. Because I think it does make you credible as a leader in the eyes of your colleagues, whether you hold that positional authority or not. It's not the title that gives you that credibility. It's your actions.
Yes.
It's your past deeds. And I think coaching really highlights a lot of those leadership skills.
Yes.
And puts it into practice so that people can see it's not just, a certificate from here or from there. It's, I know when I go and talk to Kim, it's going to get done, and it's going to get done well. And she's going to support me. She's going to ask me good questions, and she's going to help me grow as a person, which is what we want, I think, from all of our leadership team.
Yes.
So, excellent.
And I really just want to point out one thing. I really loved hearing Dr. Shante Garrett, who's now superintendent, talk about that the coaching position that she got, her first kind of like district-wide type position when she was looking for a formal leadership position, actually prepared her better than she ever could have expected for every single following role. So I think for people who are listening to this podcast and thinking about, do I even want to go into coaching? Do I even want to go into leadership? Recognizing the ways that you can prepare yourself for those next steps, regardless of what they may be, they're happening. As a classroom teacher, they're happening. As a coach, they're happening. As a person who contributes in a variety of different ways in your school, they're happening. It's just knowing how to articulate them and recognizing that in yourself to be able to see, oh, I do have the potential to do this. And that's what comes up really clearly in our Women Who Lead conversations. People have this eye-opening moment after they're listening to these conversations, like, oh, I do have the potential to be a leader. I didn't believe it in myself until I heard someone else explain it in this way. And now I see, oh, yes, this is something I can do.
Awesome. I think it's the value of all of those varied perspectives, all of those stories coming together in one point so that people can start recognizing similarities in their own journeys and, potential pathways that they can take. And like I said, I think it's a very three-dimensional view of the entire process. So I'm excited for what this season holds. Now, remind me, what season is this? Is this season 3, season 10? I can't even remember.
I'm calling it season 3. So I think our first season was like 2 years long, but that's okay. That was season 1. We just finished season 2, and now we're on to season 3.
All right. I can't wait.
Yeah. And one other exciting thing, we have switched around. Every other week is going to be a Coach Better quick tip. So we're taking our what used to be called 5-Minute Fridays on our YouTube channel, and we're pulling them into the podcast. So not only do you get every other week, you get an episode with a guest. On the alternate week, you get some kind of coaching tip from either me or Diana. So those will be spread throughout the whole season too. So we're shaking it up, doing some new things, packaging it all together in a way that we hope is relevant and engaging and interesting for all of you and also for you, Clint.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you.
All right. See you guys.
See you next time. Thank you so much for joining us for today's conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, please head over to edurolearning.com to find out about all our professional learning opportunities, including our certificate programs, Coattail, The Coach, and Women Who Lead. We only open registration for each of our global cohorts once a year, and you can find registration details, program details, and testimonials from our graduates at edurolearning.com. If you prefer to get started with something right now, we've also got self-paced courses where you can earn recertification credits, private mentoring packages we can customize just for you, and downloadable workbooks to jump into right away. Here at Eduro Learning, we provide professional learning for educators at the intersection of technology, coaching, and leadership. Our mission is to empower the relentless learner in you to embrace your inner leader and make a bigger impact in your school setting. Join our Coach Better Facebook group and connect with us on social media for more great resources at the intersection of technology, coaching, and leadership. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode, and we will see you next time.